Right. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
We get to have a really fun portion today. I actually really like this one. So we will jump in. I wasn't really in last week when Miguel was teaching, but I guess before we jump in, any highlights or anything from last week? It's okay if not. Just thought I'd ask. Uh-huh.
We're asking, because you would be the only one who knows the answer, if the menorah in Israel right now is one piece as the Torah says.
If the what?
The menorah?
Oh, the menorah?
Yeah.
It's not.
Oh.
It's as close as they can get it. That's one of the mysteries of this, is that there's actually not, it's like one of those things that there's actually not enough information to know how to do that. Like, no one knows how to pour solid gold in that large of a piece. It's really close. Like, it's not very many pieces. Like, they worked really hard to figure out how to do it, but basically, no one knows how to do that. So that's what I got for you. But it's still really cool, that menorah in Jerusalem. Anything else from last week? All right. Well, then we'll jump into this week's portion. So, trying to decide, let's see. Okay, so, we're in Numbers 13. So this is when Moses is sending the 12 scouts. Sometimes people call them spies. I don't think spies is the right term, and we're going to talk about why. But sends 12 people to go check out the land, one from each tribe, and they're referred to as princes from the tribe. However, what tribe is missing? This is Numbers 13, 3 through 15. Levi, yeah, so the Levites are missing, but we have both Ephraim and Manasseh, which are the half tribes of Joseph, right? So we still have 12, even though the Levites are not sent. So that's an interesting thing. It's showing kind of this set apart nature of the Levites. So he sends them into the land, and he says, in verse 2, send some men on your behalf, this is the Lord talking to Moses, to investigate the land of Canaan, which I am giving to Bnei Israel. And instructs them that it's supposed to be a prince of each tribe. So they're sent to investigate the land. We have it listed who is being sent from each tribe. And then, interesting note in 14:16, it says these are the names of the men that Moses sent. Should I say 14? I meant 13. 13:16, still in the first chapter, sorry. Now he gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. So it's interesting that we have kind of a renaming of Joshua there. They both have the same root, but they're slightly different. And of course, we know of him as Joshua from this point forward. So the instructions that he gives them, starting in verse 17, as he sent them to explore the land of Canaan, he said to them, go up there through the Negev, then go up into the hill country, see what the land is like and the people living there, whether they might be strong or weak, few or many. In what kind of land are they living? Is it good or bad? Also, what about the cities in which they are living? Are they walled, or do they have fortifications? How is the soil, fertile or poor? Are there trees on it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season for the first ripe grapes. So he's basically going in to tell them this is an information gathering, right? He's telling them to go in and see what's there. He's not really asking them to do anything other than bring back some of the fruit, but they're trying to evaluate this land, basically. So it tells us, of course, that they went to do that. They did bring back grapes as well as pomegranates and figs. And then we get to verse 26, which is where things get interesting. Yes?
When these 12 men were sent out, it doesn't say here whether they're in groups or individual. Further on about the grapes. There
Right.
was more than one man carrying that. But
Right.
when the expedition started, does it say anywhere? Is there any indication of how they were divided up and how they went out?
I don't believe that I remember. It doesn't say specifically. I think I always imagined that they went as a group, but I guess they maybe did split up and explore different areas. It would not have necessarily been strange for them to all travel at once, and it wouldn't have been a problem, I don't think. But it's, to cover the territory, they may have split up, but it doesn't say specifically. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, if they did, it's kind of a biblical principle, isn't it? You split up in pairs.
Yeah. So yeah, it's possible, but it just doesn't tell us.
Safety wise, I could see them staying together.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's hard to say. It seems like they at least all came back together from the way that the text is written, but we don't know that they were together the whole time. So that's an interesting question, but we don't really have enough information to fully know that. Okay, so when we get to verse 26, this is when they're coming back. It says, they traveled and returned to Moses, Aaron, and the entire community of Bnei Israel at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They gave their report to them and the entire assembly, and they showed the land's fruit. They gave their account to him and said, we went into the land where you sent us. Indeed, it is flowing with milk and honey. This is some of its fruit. Except the people living in the land are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw the sons of Anak there. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites are living in the mountains, and the Canaanites are living near the sea, along the bank of the Jordan. And then Caleb speaks up, which Caleb is the representative of the tribe of Judah. Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, we should definitely go up and capture the land for we can certainly do it. And I'm going to pause there for a second, even though I know things get interesting right after that. I'm going to stand up. This is not comfortable to me today. Okay, so they come back and they kind of give this, they give the report basically about what Moses asked them to do, right? He asked them to go and get all this information, and they come back and they say that. And they do say that the people are powerful and the cities are fortified, but they don't really say anything against going in the land. Caleb speaks up first and says, we should definitely go up and conquer it, which is actually not what the Lord had asked yet, right? But Caleb's saying that. I wonder if Caleb saying that is what caused the rest of them to respond as they did next. So let's continue. So this is verse 31. But the men who had gone up with him said, we cannot attack these people because they are stronger than we. They spread among Bnei Israel a bad report about the land they had explored, saying, the land through which we passed to explore devours its residents. All the peoples we saw are men of great size. We also saw there the Nephilim. The sons of Anak are from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our eyes as well as theirs. So now we have this, there's no way. We can't go in this land. The land devours its people. They've just given this report of that it is this great land. There are all these good things there, and now they're saying, but this land devours its people. Now we know that, they said initially that Amalek is there, so we know that there are enemies of Israel there, and that there's all these people groups living there, right? It's not I've said before that sometimes it's like, it would have been nice of the Lord to just, put a fence around it and save it for him if he was going to bring them there, but there's all these other people living there, which is what causes lots of problems, up to and including today. So this phrase, the land devours its residents, is interesting. So this could be talking about that there are, like, the people in the land are kind of fighting against one another. It could be talking about their fear of them as outsiders. So it's interesting to think about that. So it's like, so they're bringing up this, and it's sounding like they're saying that these people are always fighting against each other, and if they go in, they're just going to get caught in the fray. But we don't really know that. So this is interesting. That I always think it's interesting that they weren't really asked. They weren't really asked to give a report about whether or not they could succeed in a military conquest at this point, right? They weren't sent in as military leaders. They were sent in as leaders to just kind of scout things out and see what's there. That's all that was asked of them. Yes, they were told to observe, what are the cities like, what are the people like, but they weren't given the charge to assess, if we go in, can we conquer these people? They're just meant to go scout out and see if the land is as good as God has said it would be, since he's supposed to give it to them. So, I was reading L. Michael Morales' commentary on Numbers, and this is one of his comments about these leaders, these princes. He calls them chieftains, as they go in. He says, the role of the chieftains as leaders of their tribes was fundamental to the nature of their scouting mission, which had not a military but a theological and political purpose, namely to evaluate the divine gift of the land. They were expected to encourage their respective tribes with the goodness of God's gift. He quotes another scholar who says that the 12 are to be witnesses to the goodness of the land and the faithfulness of God. This would assure the people and give them the hope, courage, and trust in God needed for the final and potentially most dangerous part of their journey. Yeah.
Any thoughts on, so it says that they say that the land will devour people, whatever that word was, sounds like will eat them up. And then you have Deuteronomy when they're told to occupy the land, that if they don't act righteously, don't obey Torah law, the land will spit them out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like two opposite things here of you will be eaten up if we go in there now, and then God says that if you don't,
right,
according to your instructions, you'll be spit out. Any thoughts on that?
So, yeah, I mean, I guess the language is opposite as far as like devouring or spitting out, but I think that I think that it's actually like there's similar situations, and I think it's actually pretty congruent, because I think that what this is showing in this situation, being that Joshua and Caleb, which we haven't heard from Joshua yet, but we know that he and Caleb are on the same team, that Joshua and Caleb are the ones who think that they can be successful, basically mean that they have caught the vision, I guess you could say, that they understand God's faithfulness, and their faith is stronger than what their eyes are telling them, and they're understanding that if God is giving them the land, he's going to have a way for them to take over it. Whereas, and then we have what you're talking about in Deuteronomy, where it talks about if they're not faithful, that the land will spit them out, which basically means that the land will overcome them in some sense is how I'm thinking about it. So I mean, for them to be able to be successful and not be devoured by the land or killed by the land or whatever, consumed by it, defeated by it, is a similar thing, because it requires them to be faithful to God for them to be able to conquer it. So, but also the context of the Deuteronomy passages and spitting it out is in the sense of they will be cast out, but there's also, then it goes on, and they can come back. Like, they will be able to come back when they restore their righteousness back, and they commit back into the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, because when I think of that spitting out, I think of exile.
Mm-hmm.
They're exiled outside the
Right.
land, so
Yeah.
they're spit out.
Yeah.
To go into exile, and then eventually until Messiah brings them back, and thankfully we've already seen a lot of
Right.
that happening.
Yeah. So I think both situations come down to them being faithful and having faith that the Lord is going to do what he says. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure which commentary I read it in, because I read too many. But
I get it.
the devourer, its residence, I had also seen that basically is translated into surrounded by enemies.
Mhm.
And when we're going to the very first of it, like this task, like you said, they weren't told to go in and figure out a military conquest on this. They were told to go in and spy out the land, or check out the land. Well, investigating land, it says, which I am giving to B'nai Israel.
Mhm.
So on this, God never said, go in and figure out how to fight these people. God said, I'm giving you this land.
Right.
Go investigate the land. Didn't say investigate the people, it said investigate the land, check out this promised land that I'm giving you.
Mhm.
So I feel like this whole thing kind of went from, they brought back the fruit of the land like they were told
Mhm.
to, brought this beautiful bounty. So this land is really good.
Right.
Their focus is on the inhabitants that are there.
Mhm.
And yeah, they are surrounded by enemies. They're always surrounded by enemies. But that wasn't the task. The task wasn't go in and figure out how to fight these people. The task was, you haven't seen this promised land. Go check out this really cool land
Right.
that the Lord's gonna give you.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where Caleb's excitement about it is, yeah, we can definitely do this, because I feel like in his mind, he's thinking, because God's giving this to us.
Right.
So we can do it, where the other ones are already like, no, let's just go back to Egypt, because they're
Right.
like, they're not
Yeah.
looking at it as something that's being given to them, they're looking at it as something they gotta fight for.
Right. And I think that that is an important point, is that, let's say, so it sounds like, based on what we're seeing play out here, is that there's the 10 who are like, we have to assess whether we are capable of overcoming all these people, and then we have the 2 that are like, if God gave us the land, then he gave us the land. Who maybe, they don't mention it specifically, but they're probably remembering this whole thing where they got delivered out of Egypt, and the God split the sea, he killed the Egyptians, if you're remembering the miraculous and the things, these massive things that the Lord has already done, then seeing the possibility of taking the land is maybe a little bit easier than if you're just like, man, there's all these people. And it's also, I think, maybe a perspective of, if these 10 are seeing all these people there, and they're like, well, yeah, maybe we can live in the land, but if we're going to constantly be fighting with these people, or constantly having to defend our territory, or trying to live with these people, because they don't quite probably have full revelation or information about God driving those people out yet. We haven't quite gotten that which we're going to talk about here in a second, some of the contrast with what comes later. But I think, that's why I think this quote from this commentary is so interesting, is that they're supposed to go and see that the land is good, and so that they can come back and tell the people that the land is good, and stir up their faith, so that they can continue to follow the Lord and do what he's asking them to do. So, yes.
He does not agree with me, so
No.
I'll
Okay,
let you know
that's
why.
fine.
I don't think you're giving these 12 enough credit for being able to figure this out. Why else? They're told, okay, yes, they were told they were going to be given the land, but when did God ever just hand them something? They had to have known
Well,
they were going to have to fight for it.
sure.
They had to have figured that out.
Yeah.
Nobody.
I mean, they are required to partner with the Lord,
Mhm.
but I think that I think God's track record is pretty good at this point.
Yeah.
Like he told them what to do in the midst of all these plagues. He sustained them for 400 years in Egypt. He miraculously brought them out. He's supernaturally, miraculously sustaining them every day by giving them food. They have a rock that's following them around, giving water. They have his presence in the midst of them in the tabernacle, which is going to play into this story here in a minute. And so I think there's even, I think that they're supposed to have learned by this point to not judge by what this looks like. Because thinking back to this Exodus situation where the sea splits, but then the Egyptians are following them through, and they're like, why did you lead us out just to let us be pursued? And then God kills them all. Right? Like, so God has a plan. He has a way out that doesn't quite make sense. Now, we are all humans, so we can also relate to this. We have a really hard time overcoming how we read a situation versus understanding God's perspective on it, because he obviously is a little bit smarter than we are. So, and can see a little bit more of the picture than we can. And so, I mean, I think that we can also relate to the human aspect of this story, in that, of course, they're going in and they're seeing giants, they're seeing all these different people groups living in every part of it, and yes, the land is good, but it's already got people on it. So we can understand also the fact that they would go in and they would be like, I don't quite know how this is going to be ours. Like, there's a lot of things standing in our way. So I think we're kind of meant to see all the sides of it. But I think we're also meant to, we're meant to kind of understand the human aspect and also take the lesson of, of that it's probably worth trusting that the Lord has a plan if he says he's giving it. And he does, but he also doesn't take that plan away, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay.
Well, yes to what you're saying, because we're going to find out later they were being tested.
Right.
And only Joshua and Caleb made it in of the entire generation.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord did tell them they were numbered by their armies.
Yes.
And they were first numbered.
Yes.
So they know that they're to have that mentality that you are at war, that I'm sending you out in your armies. And the other thing is, it does say in 18, verse 18, that they were told by Moses via the Lord, and see what the land is like, whether the people who live in the land are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, and then it talks about the cities, are they fortified or not. So God knowing, go see and check it out.
Right.
And then come back, and so the only, like you say, only two had faith in God based on what they'd already seen him do, that no matter what it looks like, God is with us. And the others who've already failed test after test now fail this test as well.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely like finding information, but they're not going in to look at the land as though we're taking it right now, necessarily. Because the language is different, which is why I said at the very beginning, some translations call these the 12, or sometimes we refer to these as the 12 spies, that I think the 12 scouts is a better translation. And even as I was looking at, which I also don't remember which commentary I was reading this in because I read several, is that it talks about some of the language there versus, like, for example, later on in Joshua, which we know that Joshua does become the military leader, right? So it's not disconnected from military conquest, but it's also not, at this point, quite yet time for the military conquest, which we know is also because of some of the consequences of some of their actions. But anyway, let me jump ahead for just a second. So if we look at Joshua 2, so this is when they are going to go in and take the land, and he sends. In chapter 2, verse 1 of Joshua, it says, "And Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent out 2 spies from Shittim, saying, 'Go explore the land, especially Jericho.' So they went and came to the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab." I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to read this whole thing. So we know the story of Rahab hiding the spies, and that they are going. And I think that if I remember correctly from what I was reading, this language here at the beginning of secretly sending out 2 spies is different in the Hebrew even than sending out these men to investigate the land in numbers. So in this case, of course, they're right at the edge of the land. They're ready to go in. So this is their spying out and trying to find the weaknesses so that they can come in and start to conquer. And this continues to play out as Joshua leads them. But again, this has to do also with being directed by God to do that. Like, because we also know we have examples throughout the rest of the Torah and through the rest of the Tanakh of when God says to go and go into a battle, and they do what he says, they are victorious. And when he's like, no, it's not time, and they go anyway, it doesn't go well, right? So the moral of the story is that you should do what God says. Yeah. Which sounds so simple. But we know that it doesn't work out quite that simply, of course. Okay, let's continue on a little bit in the story and get some more pieces of what's going on here. Some of which we've already talked about a little bit, which is fine. So basically the 10 have swayed the rest of the people, right? They've spread this bad report. So chapter 14, Numbers 14 starts out with all the people raising up their voices. They're weeping, they're grumbling. And this is where they say, if only we had died in Egypt, if only we had died in the wilderness. Why is Adonai bringing us to this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be like plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? And they say, let's choose a leader and let's go back. Do you think they're going to be welcomed back to Egypt? Right? This sounds crazy to us, right? But it's like, and it's like, but even think about like, and they're talking about the women and children becoming plunder, which is a fair fear when you're looking at other people groups. That is what happened in ancient warfare. They take your women and children and they do nasty things to them and all these things. So it's not like that's an unreasonable fear. But also think of like when they're in Egypt, right? Moses, we only have Moses because the midwives and his mother and his sister and Pharaoh's daughter protected him, right? Because all the boys were meant to be killed. So I don't think, they're obviously being a little bit unreasonable about what they're expecting to happen if they go back to Egypt. And it sounds crazy to us. But it always makes me, like, when I read things like that and I'm like, that is insane. Who would ever do that? The Lord usually catches me and starts to talk to me about like, well, have there ever been situations where you have chosen something that you're like that? If somebody else were told you would be like that, that's really dumb. And it's like, well, we are human, right? So I think we are supposed to experience the humanity of these stories. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, on a much smaller than this, you look at even the amount of abused wives
Right.
or abused
Right.
family situations where, you escaped, you got out of there, but the fear of the unknown and the fear of whatever,
Right.
it's like it dulls out the knowing what you went through, and you can kind of like, no, I'm going to go back to that because it's almost like a safety measure, even though it was a bad thing. It's
Better the devil you know.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so you see that a lot.
Right,
Like, it's
for
like,
sure.
I don't know how to take care of myself. I don't know what tomorrow holds, so I'm just going to go back. And not even with I don't even think the idea is like when I go back, everything's going to be peachy keen. It's just like, but I'm afraid of this,
Right.
which made me wonder, like when the Lord said, go scout out the land, they've been grumbling about manna, water, everything. And it's like, and they walked in there, it's like huge fruit and
Right.
milk and honey and, all of that, which still is so funny. They describe Egypt as milk and honey.
Right.
When he's showing them this beautiful land. And part of me wondered, like, was he trying to show them hope of, yes, you're in the wilderness, but there's something really good
Yeah.
ahead for you, and I've got this great gift for you.
Right. Yeah, which I think goes back to I think the intention and the hope was that they would go and see the land, like you're saying, the fruit, how good the land is, how beautiful it is, all these different things, all this this produce and food and water, all these things that the land can provide for them. While yes, of course, there are people, and they were told to observe that as well. But I think that the hope was that the goodness of the land, which is what holds true for Joshua and Caleb, outweighs the people that are there, which the other 10 magnify the other way. The how good the land is fades to all these people that are there. So it comes back to like where you put your perspective and what angle you're looking at it from. But yeah, I mean, I think you're to your point. Like you did a much better job of saying it. It's like we see these situations play out where it's like somebody's in a terrible situation, they have this chance for freedom, but the known bad feels safer than the chance at freedom. But of course we know that like it's not like they would have returned to Egypt, right, and just been like, all right, great, you're back, go back to your old jobs, and things would have gone back to exactly how they were. Like, no way. These are slaves that have escaped, and Egypt is going to have to make a point of them, right, and they're probably just going to be all killed and or beaten or whatever as soon as they get there. So, but we don't have information about that because obviously, thankfully, Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb are managed to figure out a way forward. Which is when we get to verse 5, we see Moses and Aaron's response, and it is to fall on their faces before everybody and cry out to the Lord, which we see this several times through Numbers, right? When they grumble, when they want to turn back, their response is to fall on their faces and seek the Lord. And Joshua and Caleb kind of join them. They tear their clothes, and they kind of plead with people of Israel, I think, and say that the land is good. The land through which we passed is exceptionally good land. If Adonai is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land and give it to us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Only don't rebel against Adonai, and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They will be food for us. The protection over them is gone. Adonai is with us. Do not fear them. So it seems like Joshua and Caleb somehow have gotten some insight, revelation, something, of the fact that if God has said it, then if God is with them, then any protection or anything that these people have means nothing, right? But the rest of the people aren't quite on board yet, and they actually want to stone them. And then this is what I think is really interesting. I think this is really interesting. In the second part of verse 10, then the glory of Adonai appeared at the tent of meeting to all Bnei Israel. And Adonai said to Moses, how long will these people treat me contemptibly? How long will they neglect to trust in me, in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them? I will strike them with the plague, I will destroy them, but you I will make into a nation greater and stronger than they. So it's interesting that I always think it's interesting that it says the glory of the Lord. I kind of always expect it to be like something like the power of the Lord or the wrath of the Lord, which glory encompasses all of that. But anyway, but I think the point is that this would be the presence of the Lord coming into the tabernacle in a way that all the people can see. So they know that God is here and he's speaking with Moses. Which this solution that God initially presents is really interesting, right? Is that he's basically saying that he's going to destroy everybody, but basically make a new people out of Moses. And Moses, of course, replies back. I'm not going to read the whole thing here. But he replies back, and it's like he's reminding the Lord. It's like, remember that you made this big deal about bringing us out from the Egyptians, and they, if we're all killed in the wilderness, then they're going to feel like they've won, and you're not going to be known as the God of all the creation. And they're going to think that God is weak, basically, is the argument that he's making. And then in verse 17, I really like this part. So it says, so please, after he's made this argument about how it would look to the Egyptians, please let Adonai show his strength just as you had spoken, saying, Adonai is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression. Still, he does not leave the guilty unpunished, bringing the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation. Forgive now the guiltiness of this people in accordance with the greatness of your loving kindness, just as you have pardoned this people from Egypt until now. So basically, right, this section in verse 17 is kind of mostly quoting most of what what he says to the Lord after the Lord shows his glory on Sinai at the end of Exodus, right? So he's repeating back to the Lord these characteristics, and he's not even saying that he's not even saying that they don't deserve consequences. He's like, you have to punish, you don't leave the guilty unpunished. So he seems to he's asking for forgiveness and to pardon them, but he is acknowledging that there are consequences, which then of course we get this, and this is when he says that that basically because these people who saw his glory and his miracles have not obeyed, that they won't see the land of promise. They won't actually get to enter into the land, which that's also really really interesting, because then think about, I wonder what would have happened in their minds actually they died, never mind. They don't have to think about it for very long. I just but imagine. Sorry, I was just like imagining what it would have been like for them to live, having actually seen it, and knowing what's there, and knowing that they're not going to get to go in. So maybe I don't know. There's different perspectives on that. Maybe it's the mercy of the Lord that He didn't let them live their whole lives with that. But I don't know. I don't know how you look at that. It's either. I mean, it's definitely a consequence. But anyway. But we know that that Caleb. This is verse 24. Because a different spirit is with him, and he is wholeheartedly behind me, I will bring him into the land where he went. His offspring will inherit it. So it even says that a different spirit is in him. So I remember in last week's portion we had this this scene where basically the Holy Spirit fills the 70, right? So we're starting to see that the Holy Spirit is not a new thing, right, in Acts, which I think we already know. But we're seeing that this Spirit is connected with this, because I think that's what it's referring to here. Like Caleb's own spirit is, I think, connected with, I think there's a connection with the Holy Spirit there. So then we have this, we have all these consequences, that they're going to be in the wilderness for 40 years, and that their children will get to go in, but they're going to basically, anyone who's at this point, I think it's 20 years and older, is going to die in the wilderness, and their children will inherit it. And then of course they decide, they're like, no, we can do it. Let's go. We've sinned. Let's make it right. Let's go and do this. And of course, like we mentioned before, when God hasn't directed it, it doesn't work out very well. So but they went, and at the end of chapter 14, verse 44, but presumptuously they went up to the high mountain country, though neither the ark of Adonai's covenant nor Moses moved from within the camp. The Amalekites and the Canaanites living in the mountain country came down and attacked them and beat them all the way to Hormaz. So we end this particular story, this particular part, which we do have another chapter in this portion, which is an interesting one. But we end this scene of finally getting to see what the land of promise is, and they're kind of defeated and sentenced to life in the wilderness for another 40 years. So there's a lot happening in here, but ultimately, I think we're supposed to see that the goal of the Exodus is to get them to the promised land, right? And this situation, we're seeing that the people, that their faith is not yet great enough to get them there, which I think part of their journey for the next 40 years is to continue to build that relationship and trust with the Lord and understand that He will do what He says, both in the blessing and in the consequence, right? Because if we think back to, even in Leviticus 26, we have this account of, if you're faithful, these are the blessings that you will receive. You'll be able to be in the land. You'll be fruitful and multiply. And then it goes on. And if you are not faithful, then these are all the things that are going to happen to you. But then also giving the ability to be restored when they do turn back eventually. So at this point, we're seeing this kind of delay of the promise in some sense, because they are not willing to believe that the Lord can bring them in and can overcome the people in the land. So before we move on to talking about chapter 15, which seemingly is a very different topic, any other comments, questions, thoughts, about this seeking out the land? Yes?
Isn't it interesting that the same group of people, these scouts, these tents said, you're nuts, we can't, this is insane, we can't do this. And then a chapter later, oh, we can do it?
Yeah.
But they didn't even have the ark with them at that time.
Right. Which I think is showing us they don't fully understand the importance of what God is like really instructing them to do. Because they are like, well, he said it before, so if we just do it now, it's fine. And it's like, that's not how God works, right? Sometimes there is an expiration on a certain instruction, right? So I think, but they've also, I think what happens in between them initially saying, no, we can't do this, and then trying to go do it without the Lord, is that they have seen and felt the wrath of the God. They felt his judgment. Maybe wrath is not the right word, but they felt his judgment. They've seen his presence, because remember it said the glory fell. And so all the people would have seen that. They would have seen this manifestation of his presence in the midst of the people. And so they're like, oh, he's serious about this. And he's given them the consequence that now they're going to die in this wilderness where they've just seen this beautiful land. So then all of a sudden they're like, no, we do want to follow what God says. But at this point, it seems like it's too late for them.
They see how cheesed off God is, and then they think, oh, now he's really upset. Now we can do it.
Yeah, and then it becomes this mindset of like, we'll show him our own strength and he'll forgive us, which is not how God works, right? So there's a lot of important lessons here in how we regard the Lord, and what it looks like to partner and have faith in him versus this almost like battle of the wills, so to speak. Yeah.
So it kind of also plays into the Lord's giving you a gift and you rejected it.
Right.
And you see what happens. You rejected this gift, you grumbled and you rejected this gift. So we've got 40 years in the wilderness, and then we see that play out a little bit further when there's a defeat and they gain some land, and all of a sudden now we're going to enter the wilderness, and Moses, I feel like, has a little mini freak out when a couple of the tribes are like, well, no, we'll stay over here.
Right.
And I'm thinking he's kind of going, oh no, here we go again, you know? But yeah, the fact that when they decided to go up into that, okay, now we'll go ahead and take it, and Moses says, why are you disobeying the mouth of Adonai? That will never succeed. You should not go up, because Adonai will not be among you and you will be defeated. Like, he tells them this, right? So when we go into chapter 15, where we start talking about intentional sin and unintentional sin, to me, this looks like intentional sin. Like Moses is telling them, don't do it.
Right.
So the punishment for intentional sin, we see it play out in this too, because it's like, don't do it. Well, we're going to do it anyway. God's not going to be with you. We're going to do it anyways.
Right.
And so now, once again, we've got this, what I want apart from what God's.
Yeah, and I think it's this, I think it's one of these interesting, it's like, they know the consequences before they do it, right? It's not a surprise, which I think is always interesting in the, just like when in the Torah, when people are like, he's so, God is so full of wrath, and he's such a hard ruler, and it's like they know, like he tells them time and time again, like, this is what I'm asking you to do, and if you choose to do something else, these are the consequences, which is exactly what we have here. So of course they're not going to be successful, because they chose to do it without the Lord, and the whole point of this whole thing is they're supposed to, if they do it with the Lord, they will be successful. They will be able to conquer the people in the land, and they will inherit the gift, like you're saying, that they're being given. Yeah.
If this is in order, as you pointed out, the 10 spies with the bad report, they were dead. So this wasn't them that were saying, okay, we'll go back and take the land. It was whoever was designated to take their places, I guess. So it's kind of a lesson of who do you follow, what leaders do you pick,
right?
And so it's not so easy to pick leaders that you think, yeah, they're great, and then they do these bad things, and then they're punished. Okay, now we reconcile everything, because we chose bad leaders and we were right behind them and everything. But now, so it's kind of to me a cautionary tale what leaders do you pick?
For sure.
And can you really, even though those leaders are dealt with, can the next generation, or whatever number of generations, really reverse the course? It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
very
and
cautionary, I think.
yeah, for sure. And because, yeah, it is pretty incredible that these 10 that have, like you're saying, that these 10 that have, that spread the bad report have already died, and the people are still wanting to go and do their own thing instead of submitting to the leadership that is clearly righteous and in line with what God is asking them to do. I think in this portion of Numbers, we're kind of, and next week's portion, which Lori's going to teach, and I won't be here, and I'm very sad, is very much another rebellion story. So we very much see the Lord is dealing harshly or appropriately, I guess, with the rebellion within the camp. And we're seeing these examples that the voices of a few can sway a lot of people, and with the consequences that can happen. And it doesn't give us, I don't think, unless I missed it, it doesn't give us the number that died. It just says the people went up, but we don't know how many that went up to try to get to and I guess it says attack them and beat them down. So we don't know how many died in this battle, but they certainly felt the consequence of going up and fighting without the Lord. And we'll see in next week's portion with Korah more specifically how he deals with rebellion there. But yeah, it's definitely looking at like the leadership, and I mean, and even to the point of the fact that Moses, and I guess we don't know. I guess we don't know if the people could hear Moses' pleading with the Lord fully. It doesn't make that abundantly clear when he's talking, and the Lord's like, "I'm going to destroy everybody, and I'm going to make a new people out of you, Moses." And basically, Moses is like, "No, we gotta work with the situation here." I don't know if the people fully realize that Moses really kind of went to bat for them and really went and stood up for them, and like that they get to survive because he pleaded with the Lord. And so then just kind of disregarding that and going without the Lord is like there's just more and more things that make this pretty incredible that these people would be willing to go and try to conquer this land without the Lord being with them. So then we have an interesting switch. It feels like switch in topic in chapter 15. So we've just had this defeat with the Amalekites, and then chapter 15 starts out with the Lord telling Moses what he's supposed to tell Israel about what they're supposed to do when they do enter the land. So one of the things I think that this shows us is that they do serve as a reminder that God is faithful, and that even though they are receiving this consequence of now they have to be in the wilderness 40 years, it's going to be the second generation that goes in, not the first, that his intentions to take them into the land and his faithfulness and Israel's role and its calling has not changed. So he's telling them when they enter the land that he's giving to them and making their homes, these are the offerings they're supposed to present, either as free will offerings or during the Moedim or the appointed times, and that these offerings will be like a pleasing aroma to the Lord. So it goes through all these instructions about what that's supposed to look like, that every native born is supposed to do them. If there's an outsider residing with them, meaning that has joined themselves to Israel, they are also supposed to do these things. In verse 15, it says, "The community will have the same rule for you as well as for the resident outsider. It will be a lasting statute throughout your generations. As for you, so for the outsider, will it be before Adonai." So again, this is speaking of those from the nations who decide they want to come alongside Israel, live among them, confess their allegiance to the God of Israel, that they kind of have some of these same requirements. So it continues on about the offerings, which many of these this is kind of a summary reiteration of many of the sacrifice instructions we've seen previously. But it talks about the grain offering, the wine offering, the animals, all these things. And they're all meant to be this pleasing aroma. So it's basically, I think, reiterating that when they go in the land and the presence of God is still in their midst, they're still going to be doing all of these things, and they're going to bring the best to him, so that his presence will continue to remain with them. And then we get into these instructions about these intentional and unintentional sins, or the TLV kind of uses the terminology of unintentional sin and defiant sin or action, which I think I kind of like that terminology. I think that defiant terminology is maybe feels a little bit stronger to me than just intentional sin, because it's not just that you're intending to do something, it's that you are defying what God has said as you're doing it. So we're seeing this contrast, and Morales points out that this is setting kind of these two paths before you with this unintentional sin and this defiant sin. That you can either attain abundant life in the land through loyalty to the Lord, or you can be cut off from this covenant community and not live in the land because of willful rebellion. So it's meant to kind of demonstrate to us that there's only two paths, right? There's either the path with the Lord, or there's the path, your own path. And so it's either, and I think it's interesting here too, that it does show the mercy of the Lord, of that there is allowance for unintentional sin. Like, he's not saying be perfect or be cut off, right? He's saying recognize your humanity. When you do unintentionally sin, make it right, do what I've told you to do, and continue in covenant relationship with me. Or if you're defiant, then off you go, right? So I think that is also really, really interesting, and shows something particular about God too, because I think there is his mercy and his kindness is shown in that, of that he does provide a way back when things unintentionally go wrong. He in some sense makes an allowance for our humanity. He recognizes that we are not God, and provides a way back, but he also is like, but your will is powerful, and your mind is powerful. It gets into this whole free will conversation, which, everybody we could all wrestle with forever. But it basically is that you're making the point that your will is powerful, and if you choose to defy the Lord, there are consequences for that. And yet he's not going to force people to be obedient. And then the chapter closes up. I'll just summarize this last little section, and then we can open it up. We have a few minutes left, so we can continue to talk about some of these things. But he gives the instruction in verses 37 through 41 about tzitzit, about these tassels, these purple or blue, tassels on the corners of their garment. And in verse 39 it says, so whenever you look at them, you will remember all the mitzvot of Adonai and do them, and not go spying out after your own hearts and your own eyes, prostituting yourselves. This way you will remember and obey all my mitzvot, and you will be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. So these tzitzit, are supposed to fulfill a couple of purposes. One, it's an identity marker. The people of Israel, if you see these tassels on the corners of their garments, it's saying, it's proclaiming to everyone around you that you are part of this people group. And it's also supposed to remind them, he's giving them a visual, physical reminder of all of the commandments and all the promises that he's made. And it's supposed to remind them that he is the God that brought them out of Egypt so that he could dwell with them, which is a pretty big deal. So It's not meant to be, the tzitzit aren't meant to be this like legalistic thing. It's meant to remember. It's meant to kind of mark this priestly nation. That's the way some of the commentators talk about it. Is that Israel's role as this priestly nation, that they would have these blue tassels, which would be the same blue that the priests would wear as well. That even though they're not all Levites or priests within Israel, they are, as a nation, a priestly nation, that are meant to be this light that draws other nations to the God of Israel. And then it's also meant to remind them that they have God's presence with them, and that He's given them basically everything they need to live a full and abundant life with God in their midst. It's interesting that this instruction. Again, sometimes, I did look into the chronology of everything. Sometimes things are a little bit out of order in the Torah, but if it is falling, right after this situation where they are being told they don't get to go into the land, they're still receiving this reminder that God is with them. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like one connecting point, because it does seem like, okay, was this interpolated? Because it seems like in the middle of the story just kind of breaks up and goes back to almost like Leviticus type content, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the tassel was to remind them to perform the commandments, but it also said that it was to remind them not to explore, and that's the exclusive word that's used throughout the whole story. The spies go up and explore the land. So the tzitzit would remind them not to explore essentially the desires of their hearts, what their eyes see. So just interesting that it would choose that word, which was exclusively used for the spies going up to reconnoiter the land, but it would apply it differently like that. So it seems to be a connection point by the use of that.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Okay, so.
I was like, I see your face.
I know, I was
I have
debating
something.
telling this story or not, but from some of the reading I had done, and to me it was a little humorous, with the tzitzits, the placement of them was at the men's waist. And so I think it was some rabbi or something was telling a story about this, and said basically the reason it's around their waist is if they're going to commit some kind of a sin, before they drop their doors, they see these, and it's a reminder of the purity on that too.
Yeah.
But the one thing with the teaching of the unintentional versus defiant sin, which is basically setting your heart against God in the defiant sin. Unintentional, you didn't willfully set your heart.
Right.
You're just messing
Human.
up. Right. And so many people, it's like where it defines the difference of like people are like the harsh God of the Old Testament, and then of course God got saved in the New Testament and he's okay with everything or something, with this grace thing. But the author of Hebrews in Hebrews 10 still talks about the fact that when you know the truth and you willfully disobey, so they're pulling it in there like this hasn't really changed. I mean, there is still a result of willful sin.
Right.
And it's a really scary thing.
Right.
And so I think the placement of that in the book of Hebrews helps keep the fact that there is this continuity.
Right.
It wasn't okay then, and it's not okay now.
Yeah.
And you can cross the line, because a lot of people believe, oh, well, you can never go too far. Well, I don't think the scriptures are necessarily showing that, because it says if you know the truth and you still willfully go against that, that expectation, the fiery expectation, is huge. And it always makes me very nervous when I read in Hebrews 10:26 through I think 31, when you think of people that knew the truth and now have gone way out. Yeah. That is a very fearful thing to read.
Right.
And so, I always love continuity where I see it here, and that the fact that God has not changed.
Right. Right, and I think we've had in some contexts we've had the definition of grace has evolved to this what I call chief grace of like that grace means that you can do whatever you want and God will forgive you, and that's not what it means. Grace is is empowerment for obedience.
Yes.
Right. And yeah, I mean, what you're talking about, we could get into the debate of can you lose your salvation, can you not? And we're not going to get into that debate. We won't go there right now. We've got 4 minutes. We're not having that debate right now. But I do think it's a serious thing, and I do think that it's not a small thing. It's not a serious. It's not insignificant when someone who does know the truth and chooses to walk away. Now, does that mean we don't pray for, quote unquote, the prodigals or those who have turned away to come back? Of course not. Of course we still pray for that, and I think, and that's the Lord's to work out and where their status is. But it's not a small thing when people, particularly, proclaim His truth, say that they know Him, and then turn away, or speak against Him, or blaspheme the Lord, or things like that. You're right. It's not a small thing. And I don't think the New Covenant scriptures, when we really read them, convey that. Like you're pointing out with Hebrews, but even in other places, even with the teachings of Yeshua, that he raises the bar in several respects of like, it's not even just about the action, it's about your thoughts. I think it's somewhere in Ephesians that there's a phrase or something that's like that you're responsible for what you know. So if you've learned the truth, then you are responsible for it. So yeah, it's not a small thing. To turn away or to become defiant. That's why I like this terminology of defiant. It's not just I'm doing what I want. It's actually, it's like you're either walking with the Lord and your will is submitted to the Lord, and yes, there you will unintentionally sin. Again, like that's the kindness of the Lord that He brings away back, or you are defiant. There's like not a middle ground. It's either you are submitted to the Lord or you're defying Him. And I think it's important to keep that. And like you're saying, I don't think that becomes lighter in the New Covenant era after the coming of Yeshua. Sandy?
I think it's interesting in verse 36 where the community becomes, the Lord doesn't just kill them.
Right.
He says they must die, but they become involved in that.
Right.
Stoning for a lesson, I guess, or for, meaning they're...
Yeah.
It's showing you can't
live
this way. And
yeah. I think God has to really make the point of like that He means what He says, which you would think that we would know.
Well, even if they died immediately, you'd think they'd know. But
right, but knowing that...
It's interesting to get involved in
yeah, and it comes back to this, there's always this tension between the individual and the community, right? And I think it's making this point that the sin of an individual impacts the community, right? Mm-hmm. Which is what we even saw with the 10 and the rest of the people, that even after the 10 died, the people are still like, we're going to go do what we want, Like that it's showing this connection that your sin is actually not just your own. Right? Even if you're the only one who's actually sinning, it has an impact on the community. And therefore the community is involved in the consequence. And I think that that's another really important topic and something that would be fun to talk about, but it is time to end. So thank you for a great conversation, and we will go enjoy service. So Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks, Selma.
Thank you.